This is Matt Brown, and you're listening to Just a Good Conversation. My first memories of a garden were at my grandparents' home in Downey, California. My grandfather had a small one on the side of his house. We would pick baby tomatoes and eat them like they were candy. Some 40 years later, we have a massive garden in our backyard. Some of the lessons I've learned to have a better garden have come from my guest today, Gardener Scott. His YouTube channel and the things I've learned from it have helped me to make better food.
I've been doing this for more than 3 decades, and I still get excited when I go to the garden and I see that plant pop up for the first time, or I see the first ladybug of the season, or a couple days ago I had the first hummingbird of the season show up, and it's that excitement of something new that really stimulates all of us.
I'm Matt Brown, host of Just a Good Conversation. Take a listen to my archives. My guests have ranged from medics who have been awarded the Silver Star Medal, Oscar winners, and Hall of Fame coach and small business owner, Lynn Rogers.
I was fortunate on one hand. I had parents that gave me a wide lane to drive in. I wasn't pushed in any one direction or really asked a lot to perform at a certain level. But the downside of that was I also didn't learn how good that felt when you gave 100% to something. And like I said, when I met Coach Wolf and started to learn about the sport of gymnastics, it just changed my heart, changed my world.
Go to justagoodconversation.com for all our archives. Let's take a quick break for my sponsor before diving into my conversation with Scott Wilson. Horticulture is his game, and Garden Scott is his name. How are you, sir?
I'm doing well. How are you doing today?
I'm doing fantastic. I am so glad you had the time and to jump on and talk on the podcast, because you are somebody I've been watching for a very long time. You have helped me out, my mom, her friends. I have thrown your name around and sent many of your links out to people I know on your YouTube channel, because you are fantastic as walking people through how to be a gardener.
Well, thanks, Matt. I appreciate that.
Yes. So tell me, as I know, because I'm a semi-stalker when you're researching your guests. 30 years ago, you got into the horticulture gardening game. I've watched you change homes over the years, and gardens come and go and change and expand. What got you into gardening?
And so it's interesting. So there's a couple different levels that I look at. And the thing that got me interested in gardening about 35, 36 years ago now was just having a family and having kids and a wife. And I bought my first house and we had a backyard. And like so many people, I started a garden. And it was in Montana, which was an extremely challenging environment. I knew nothing about gardening. And from there, I moved to California. I was in the Air Force, a career Air Force pilot. And in California, same thing, decided to have a garden, but it was so much easier to have a garden in California than it was in Montana that I kind of got the bug. It kind of got me thinking that I could have some success with gardening. And then we moved to Oklahoma, and it was terrible. There were so many bugs the size of your fist in Oklahoma that want to do nothing but eat your plants, that I didn't have success. And then moved to Colorado, and this is where I retired from the Air Force. And so I had the inkling. I had the interest while I was in the Air Force here in Colorado. I actually created a pretty big garden, made a lot of mistakes. And then when I retired and tried to figure out what I was going to do in retirement, I just coincidentally one day saw a little blurb in the newspaper that the Master Gardener program was accepting applicants. And I applied and was accepted and became a Master Gardener. And having been an instructor pilot in the Air Force, I have an affinity for instructing, and I like to teach people whatever I can. And the Master Gardener program, of course, was looking for instructors. And that was almost 20 years ago, and I've been teaching gardening ever since.
Wow. Okay. I should have known you were some kind of instructor because the way you lay out your videos have that feel. Like it's just
Absolutely.
step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and I'm going to get you to the conclusion and you're going to be better after we're done.
Yeah. And a lot of that does come from my Air Force training because I taught at the school. I flew the KC-135 refueling tanker, and I taught at the school brand new pilots, and that's how we had to approach it. Someone who knows nothing about flying, and a few hours later they're going to be in the air in a life or death situation, so to speak. And so gardening is much easier to teach. The ramifications aren't nearly as threatening as being at altitude or being upside down in flight. But the process is still the same. You have to lay out what the flight plan is, what point A and what point B, and what the final destination should be. And you're exactly right. That's how I spend time preparing my videos and try to lead you from the beginning, not knowing anything, to that point where you can be a successful gardener.
You nail it. I mean, you nail it real well in the way you lay it out. And I really do appreciate that when I watch your stuff, that it makes it easier to follow along.
Oh, great. Thanks.
So let's start from the, like, for a very beginners. I love how you always touch on that. You do like, I could do an expert. I'm a beginner. Let's talk about people that know nothing about gardening. What should be their first simple step for them to get started in gardening?
So what I always recommend, and I know you've heard me say this in videos, is just to start small, to start with a single pot or a single container, a 5-gallon bucket, maybe one bed in the garden, and just start with some seeds, or you go to the store and buy a tomato plant or a pepper plant and put it in the ground. Just very, very small. Too many people, I think, try to start big, and they see videos like mine with a big garden and think they can do it, and it just becomes overwhelming. There's so much about gardening, the soil, the plant, how much you're supposed to water, the weather to include sun and wind and rain and snow and hail, and then you have the insects that come in, and you have animal pests that can come in. There's so much that can happen to that plant that if you have 50 plants to start with, you're just going to be overwhelmed. But if you can focus on a very small area with just a couple plants, now your attention will be on that plant. And so the soil and the water and the weather and the pests and everything else are much easier to manage when you start small.
So what's like simple 101? Should you be like a tomato plant in a little pot if you live in an apartment or a condo and you got a balcony?
Yeah, absolutely. And my daughter, when she was going through college, had a tomato plant in a pot on her balcony of her apartment, because the suggestion I have is grow what you want to eat or what you want to look at. And most people are used to seeing tomato plants in their garden. And so it makes perfect sense to grow a tomato plant as one of your very first plants. You can go to the store, they sell them, and you just put the plant in a pot, put some potting soil around the roots, and you can grow a tomato. That's one of the easiest ways to do it. If you have a little bit of space in a backyard or in the side of your house, now you can expand a little bit and think about, what do you eat on a regular basis every day? And if you like salads, well, then grow some lettuce and grow some radishes and maybe grow a cucumber or two. So it really comes down to what you want to grow and why you're gardening in the first place. And it may not even be food. I know many people that start gardening just to grow some flowers that they can cut and put on the table.
Sure. And I know you're really big on this, is have a plan. Have a year plan, a 5-year plan, a 20-year plan, right? If you're going to grow, apple trees or lemons, you got to realize it's going to take a while for them to mature. So where do you place them? Where are you putting your beds? All that stuff matters in a layout.
Oh, absolutely. And I recommend as well taking your time. You don't have to do everything overnight. And you move to a new house, or you've been in a house and now you want to start gardening. Take some time. I actually have the very first video I did. I just moved to the house on that now about 3 years ago. And the first video I did at this house was literally me just standing out in the backyard and observing,
Mm-hmm.
just trying to figure out where things were going to go, where the garden might fit best. And then I put in a couple beds, and then I started figuring out, okay, I can build out this space. And you're exactly right. I have a 5-year plan. In the first year, I built 6 raised beds. In the second year, I created an enclosed garden space of beds 25 feet on each side in a square. And then I added a couple containers. And at the end of the second year, I added a greenhouse and a bunch of fruit trees. And now this year, this will be my 3rd year, I'll be adding a pergola and pathways and more fruit trees. And that's how I do it. Every year, you just add more as you find the time and the best location, and as you learn how to do it.
I don't know if you said this or not in that video. Did you kind of think of it as how it's going to be for a year? Because you've got where you're at, you got to deal with weather, you're at altitude, but you also like where the sun rotates. Obviously, as we know, it's different in the winter to the summer. So where is going to be the best sunlight for your, the best advantage for you? Did you take that into consideration as well, all those situations?
Exactly. And that's why I say I, just literally just stood outside and observed. And it wasn't just a single day. It was observing for a week and a month and a year. And so as I added these extra beds and as I expand my garden, it's after seeing what happens in the winter and what happens at the different seasons of the year, what kind of animals are rolling through the garden, my grandkids and how they use the garden. All of those become factors as you plan and build out your space.
Yeah. You've got something very different that, I have to deal with is you've got wildlife. You've got deer to deal with and little bigger pests than I deal with. Is that something you took into consideration again when laying out your garden and protecting it, right?
Yeah, I knew I had gophers. And so I had to plan the beds I was going to grow in to counteract the gophers. So that's one reason why I have raised beds, because at the bottom of all of my beds, I have wire mesh to keep the gophers from tunneling in. But I didn't know I had deer. I knew there were deer in the area, but I'd seen no sign of deer in my backyard. And so I discovered deer after being here about 2 years. They started nibbling on my fruit trees. So then I had to put netting over the trees so they wouldn't eat them. And then I got a dog this last year, Mala.
I saw,
and
yeah.
Mala's done a pretty good job of digging up gopher holes and chasing away the deer. And she loves sticks. Well, she discovered that there's all these sticks that are at eye level. And she started eating my fruit trees worse than the deer did. And so now I've got fencing around all my fruit trees to keep the dog and the deer out. And so it's an evolving process. As soon as you discover one thing, there's always going to be something else that you have to contend with.
Well, it's one thing if it's wildlife. You don't want your own animal destroying your garden.
Exactly. Yeah.
All right, so let's talk about the number one thing I think, and maybe you to call me crazy, but soil. You got to have good soil, correct?
Yes. Yes. Soil is key to garden success. I say that over and over again, and I'll continue to say it for many, many years to come. The Colorado State University, who ran the Master Gardener program that I went through, some of their studies show that more than 80% of plant problems can be attributed to the soil. So pests that are eating the plants, diseases of the plants, poor harvests, all of that is often attributed to just poor soil. So if you have good soil, you're less likely to have disease and pest problems, and you're more likely to have those successful harvests, which is really a big reason why you're doing it.
Now, what is, and I'm still learning about soil. I've been doing it for a long time, but it's a science. What's good soil?
Okay, so if you can actually find some of these charts online that show that soil is 5% organic matter. That's really the key component. You've got 45% mineral, 5% organic, and then the other part of it is air and water, basically. So you want a moist soil that has air pockets, pore space for oxygen to get into it. But the key part that we have control over when we talk about good soil is adding organic matter to try to get 5% of the volume. Compost, crushed up leaves, grass clippings. That it really doesn't matter what it is. You just have to get some organic matter into the soil.
Okay, so that's key, because I've created a second compost pile, or made a box, and I know that's a massive, key to the success of having a good garden is putting that in there.
Right.
Is there, and there's a million videos, and I will link yours on the podcast, is what's a good starting point for people if they want to get into a compost to help their soil? What's a good little first step for them?
Just to start it, and when I say organic, I'm talking about anything that used to be alive. Mm-hmm. So anything that you cut from your kitchen, from the garden, from your neighbor, that's the kind of stuff that you just take and start putting it into a pile. And there's a lot of science involved. There's a lot of art to making good compost, but really you just got to start. You just got to take your grass clippings, dump them in a pile, add some leaves and the banana peels and the lettuce and the radish roots that you have from your trimmings of dinner, and just start throwing it all together into a pile. And then eventually, hopefully sooner rather than later, you'll figure out the right ratios and how you mix nitrogen materials with carbon materials, the greens
right.
and the browns, or what we call it. But just getting started, like most things in gardening, you just got to do it. You just got to put that seed in the ground. You got to start that transplant. You got to start the compost pile, and then you'll learn as you proceed.
Right. Now you said a magic word there. You said seed. And I know by watching, I've seen it. Will you advocate beginners to start with seeds, or like little plants that are maybe 8 a foot high, starter plants? Which one do you recommend?
I think for brand new gardeners, and I do this with kids, I ran a big school garden program. Kids can take a seed, and adults, of course, put it into soil, and in a couple days, a little plant is growing. And depending on what you choose, a lettuce plant, a radish plant, in a month, you actually have a plant that you can harvest and eat. And so to start with, in the very beginning, if you know nothing about gardening, I think that's a great way to start, because you can actually almost literally see it grow day to day. Mm-hmm. And then at the end of the month, you have something to show for it. And then, with that understanding of how you need to take care of a plant, you need to water it, you need to put it in the sun or underneath some lights, then it becomes easier to buy a tomato plant and put it in a pot. And that's, I think, kind of the natural progression. And if if you're anything like me, I remember back to second or third or fourth grade, and we all brought a milk carton from home, and we put in a pumpkin seed or something along those lines.
Uh-huh.
And that's a great way to get kids involved with gardening, but especially for adults who never had that opportunity. I think a seed or a couple seeds is a great way to start.
I remember that same very thing. We had a teacher and we started, September, we planted something and we watched all year long it grow. And it was the best thing because it was like every day you would check on it. And then a week later you check on someone, like it would pop out of the ground and you're like, oh, I got something.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it fires you up when you're a kid because all of a sudden you're like bugging your parents, like, let's plant something.
Exactly. And I think that is such a huge part of gardening is that excitement. I try to keep that excitement going on a daily basis. I've been doing this for more than 3 decades, and I still get excited when I go to the garden and I see that plant pop up for the first time, or I see the first ladybug of the season, or a couple of days ago I had the first hummingbird of the season show up. And it's that excitement of something new that really stimulates all of us to enjoy gardening. And if you enjoy it, you're much more likely to stick with it and to learn more about it and to keep trying all those new things that I just think are so special about it.
Oh yeah. So give me your like top 5 do's and don'ts for gardening. What do you think people should be doing and for God's sake not doing?
Well, we've already talked about a couple about it. So
okay.
Soil, you have to focus on the soil. And so in the beginning, you can buy a bag of potting mix, but you really need to understand that soil is critical. It's key to the success. So you're going to have to learn more about the soil. The second part we touched on briefly was planning. You should have some kind of plan, even if you're just putting a single seed into a pot.
Mm-hmm.
Why are you doing that? What's the reason for it? Are you trying to grow the tomato plant to harvest? Are you trying to grow the flowers? There's some reason behind it. And so you should have a plan associated with, I'm putting a seed in the ground and I'm looking for a particular outcome from putting that seed in. And I plan months ahead of time for my garden, of course.
Sure.
The plan doesn't need to be that extensive or that involved for brand new gardeners. It can simply be, I'm going to put this seed in the ground and I'm going to come back and water it every single day. And then once it starts growing, I'm going to put it out into the sunlight because I know it needs to have sun. So a plan can be that simple, just the steps that you need to do to reach the outcome. Usually it's a harvest of some type. The weather, I think, is particularly important. And I put that in the top 5, and it's an observation of the weather.
Mm-hmm.
All of our gardens are unique. I'm in Colorado. My garden is at 7,500 feet elevation.
Whoa.
It's a challenging environment, and it's definitely different from your garden and what you're doing. And so each of us have to recognize our own unique characteristics about our weather patterns and our climate that when we start gardening, we have to observe what's happening with the clouds and the wind and the rain and all those other factors. And so that ties in with planning to a certain degree, because choosing the right plant is also in the top 5. You got to choose the right plant for your location, because I can't grow banana trees. That's no surprise to you, of course.
Yeah.
But that's part of it. You have to understand that there are some plants that will be better for you to grow in your area, and you might not be able to grow plants that you grew up with or that somebody is telling you should grow. So you do need to recognize, as part of the planning and as part of your climate and weather, that you choose the right kind of plant. And then the 5th thing I would put as one of the most important things is to recognize that you need patience. Gardening doesn't happen overnight. It takes time for plants to grow. It takes time for you to learn what you need to do to keep the plant alive. And there's a lot involved from the beginning of the season to the end of the season. And sometimes it looks like things aren't going right. Well, just have patience, because often things will correct themselves, or you'll figure out the right way to approach a particular problem. And in the end, the enjoyment comes back, because when you've put all those pieces together and you have that successful harvest, it just makes everything worthwhile.
Yeah. Yeah. What are some other like crucial don'ts? Like, is there something like, are you, I rather do a wood raised box than a metal raised box, or, like, is there any really foolish things to save people headaches to keep them in love with gardening?
Yeah. So my basic philosophy is that one of the best ways to learn about gardening is to make a lot of mistakes as you garden.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. I can attest to that one.
Yeah, because the things go wrong, and then you think, oh, you knucklehead, and not to do that again.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of that about gardening. And as long as you approach it with the recognition, the acknowledgement that things are going to go wrong, there are going to be problems, then hopefully you can keep a smile on your face. But one of the big things that and it really comes down to each individual gardener and how they choose to garden. But I don't like using chemicals. I think we've just become too dependent on fertilizer, on pesticides, on herbicides. They're just, and it used to be this way. My grandmother and aunts, and when I was a kid, that's what you did. You just doused the plants. If there was a bug, you just killed all the bugs. And if the plants weren't growing, you just poured a bunch of fertilizer on it. And I've learned there are so many better ways to deal with pests and nutrients and fertilization that you really don't need the chemicals. And we talked about the soil. Soil is important, but it's really the soil life within the soil that is what the plants need. And that soil life is taking the nutrients in the soil and making it available in a form that the plants can use. Well, if you're pouring all these chemicals on the soil, you're disrupting, if not flat out killing, all of the life that's in the soil. And so now you don't have that relationship between a good soil and your plants. And you can have wonderful soil, but if the life in the soil is dead, then you have terrible soil, and your plants won't do well at all. So that's one of those things I try to caution against. But as far as if it's a raised bed, an in-ground bed, a wooden bed, a metal bed, containers, 5-gallon buckets, or cloth bags, it really doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It's however you want to try it. I've got wood beds, I've got metal beds, I've got cloth beds, I've got high beds, I've got low beds. You've seen my videos.
Right.
I've got beds of all different types. Now part of that is because I'm making YouTube videos to demonstrate different options.
Right.
And so I'm demonstrating different ways of doing it, all within my garden space on purpose.
Yeah.
For the educational perspective.
Right.
But if you find that you don't like raised beds, then don't grow in raised beds. It's it's as simple as that. If I have a lot of people that comment on because I like raised beds.
Yeah.
That they don't. And it's like, fine. I'm not telling you that you have to follow any particular way of gardening. You discover for yourself which way is best, and that's the way you're most likely to continue moving into the future.
Right. My grandfather always said he would rather have a handful of earthworms than a handful of Miracle Grow.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I completely agree with that.
Yeah, you give him some earthworms and he would put it in his garden. He's like, oh, those buddies are doing work. They're way better. They'll make more earthworms. They're going to hollow out the bottom of my garden and make air and leave debris that's good for it. And yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, best things for your garden.
Absolutely. I like that idea.
With the cost of food skyrocketing, whether it's chicken, eggs, meat, lettuce, everything, I feel for my wife. We've got a massive garden bed, but there's still things, we have chickens and there's still things we still have to pay for. What is a good thing for people if they want to like help? And I know you've done this with that zero cost garden to help them kind of offset some of these costs, to think about in a year or so, I can have seasonal garden going year round, helping me not feel so much pain in the wallet.
Right. Yeah. Well, the first thing is to do an inventory or a budget, or, put a spreadsheet together and try to identify your food costs. What is it you're spending money on? And then you can start going to column B or column C and decide, is that something that you could grow? So, for instance, bananas. I would love to be able to grow a banana tree, but I just can't. So I would put that on my list of something I eat, but I can't grow. But most of us have a salad or a vegetable every night with dinner.
Mm-hmm.
And so start identifying those kind of foods, and almost all of us can grow lettuce. And you can grow, to your point, depending on where you live, you could grow lettuce year round. And so at my supermarket, I can go buy a bag of pre-cut lettuce for about $3.50.
Okay.
Or I can go out to my garden and harvest a couple leaves or a couple heads of lettuce, and I just saved myself $3.50. And if you do that every single day, this is where it becomes just mind-boggling. If you just grow lettuce to make a salad, there's $100 a month that you're saving in lettuce costs that you may not even realize you're spending.
Yeah. And I guarantee people don't think about that. How many times a week they have lettuce, whether it's on a sandwich or a regular salad. That's a huge cost factor you can save.
Absolutely. And then, if you like to cook, I like to cook. And so I like to use fresh herbs. Well, if you go to the store and buy one of those little plastic things of herbs, it's like $5 and it's enough for a single meal, maybe a couple of them, or you just grow your own herbs. And I have not bought thyme or oregano or sage or tarragon or mint for years, because I grow my own. What I don't use fresh, I dry and then use it through the rest of the year. And it's just one of those kind of things. Identify the things that you're using that cost a lot and see if you can grow those instead. So I'd save hundreds of dollars, or could save. I don't buy herbs anymore, but if I were buying a lot of fresh herbs, I would be saving that. And then, the cucumbers and the tomatoes, those are the most obvious plants that we grow in the garden, but it's what you're eating and buying from the store that you should take a look at. And if, a typical grocery run is $20 or $30 in the produce section, well, you might be able to save that on a regular basis.
Sure. I mean, have you ever had it'd be interesting what a third party auditor came in and looked at your grocery bill, then looked at your garden and said, wow, Scott, you're saving, $400 a month in grocery bills because it's outside in your backyard.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. I'm looking out my window at my garlic bed. And so, same thing. I haven't bought garlic at the store in many, many years. And my bed of garlic has about 120 bulbs of garlic. And some of those, and so I make garlic powder. I make pickled garlic. I use garlic in all kinds of cooking. And I save garlic at the, to plant for the next year. But if you buy, even on sale, a bulb of garlic, might be $3 or something like that. I don't know. I haven't bought garlic, but
yeah.
But right, just that alone, that one bed is saving me hundreds of dollars in garlic cost. And so, yeah, if you were to do an audit of each of my beds, I have a small bed with horseradish. The last time I went to the store to just see how much horseradish cost, just a little root of horseradish, it almost made me throw up how expensive horseradish is at the store, because it's one of those things that you don't use very often, but when you need it for a recipe, you got to have it.
Right.
So I have just a small pot of horseradish. So when I need it, I don't have to run to the store and buy a horseradish root that I'm only going to use for one recipe. I just go out to my backyard and dig up some root and use it in the recipe. And I can do that with rhubarb. I can do that with all kinds of plants that I have growing that I just don't even think about. Strawberries, raspberries, blackberries, all the fruit bushes I have. I probably should do an audit. I'll probably do a video about that one of these days, because when you break down the cost that you're saving, it really makes it worthwhile. And there is some upfront cost,
Sure.
because I have the raised beds. I have built the raised beds, but using that garlic as an example, when I built the bed that the garlic is in a couple years ago, the wood and the soil to fill that bed was about $200, maybe $250. But this year's crop alone is giving me about $300 worth of garlic.
Well, that's this year, right? And that's on an older bed, yeah.
Exactly. And I recouped the cost for each of my beds last year, just with all the stuff that I grew. And so this year, I basically am growing for free. The construction, those initial construction costs have paid for themselves, because I'm now in my third year, and be it the peppers or the tomatoes or whatever it happens to be. You probably have seen some of those videos that I have with the tomatoes and the peppers, and I ferment. And so that's another part of it. You don't necessarily have to eat everything fresh.
Sure, yeah, right.
You can save it and put it in your pantry, and now all during the winter, you're saving yourself from having to go to the store and buy food, because you've learned how to preserve your harvest.
Yeah, I mean, I was watching one today. It was how to prune tomatoes for the best harvest. I was rewatching it.
Mm-hmm.
You did that in 2018, and it's almost got 1.1 million views. Simple little things like that. How to just take care of your garden, prune it, make it produce more for you. It's like so simple and so great. I want more people to get their hands in the dirt and garden. It's such a wonderful thing.
Oh, absolutely. I'm on board with you. I want to get more people out there with their hands in the soil growing as well, because it just, this, you garden, it just makes you feel good. Just to be in the garden makes you feel good. And then you throw on the benefit of some food that you can eat. Well, what's better than that?
Right. So let's talk, because I'm a raised bed guy, right? I've built 3 beautiful ones for my mom. I built some brand new ones for my wife. What do you like when building a raised bed? What is your preference, and what kind of advice can you give to people?
And so I actually made a list, and I've got 3 different videos with 10 in each of those videos. The 30 benefits of raised beds.
Jeez.
And so, there's all kinds of things.
I know you're a wood guy, right? You prefer wood.
So I prefer the wood, because for me, being a little bit older, having some back issues, a raised bed that's about 18 to 20 inches above the ground, mm-hmm. that's made of wood, I can sit on it and garden in that bed and not put any pressure on my back at all. Right. So that's my preference.
Right.
I also have the big area that I built. The beds are 21 inches high. They're framed in wood, so I can sit on them, but they're actually enclosed with metal, with corrugated galvanized steel, just because that's a little bit less expensive with the lumber cost these days.
Oh, yes.
But I can still sit on it.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's really my number one reason for raised beds, and how I build my raised beds is just so that I can sit on them and garden easily.
I would say my favorite video that you did was the material in which you put in the raised bed to start, with the wood and the greens and the grass. That was great because I prepped like 3 months out before with all the material. So it was fantastic. That raised bed filled up immediately with everything I had from months back.
Yeah, you know, especially when you're growing in a bed that's 18 or 20 inches tall, the natural assumption is that whole bed needs to be filled with soil. But when you think about the plants you're growing, most of the plants we're growing, their roots are only in the 8 to 12 inch range. Mm-hmm. They only get that deep. Some plants, you know, like tomatoes, can get very deep. But if a 20-inch bed and you only have 10 inches of soil for the roots, that's all you need. So that bottom 10 inches, or the bottom half of a tall raised bed, doesn't need to be fancy, expensive soil. And so what you're alluding to is putting logs and branches and twigs and wood chips and grass and leaves, and you fill that bottom space with organic matter that will attract the earthworms that your grandfather loves. Yeah. And as it decomposes and breaks down, it's going to add nutrients to the soil from the bottom. And so as those earthworms crawl up through the bed, they're bringing all of those nutrients at the bottom of the bed up to the top. And then I'm a huge believer in mulch, adding organic matter on top of the soil. That will decompose and enrich the soil from above. And so you have a raised bed, and you're basically feeding it with natural organic products that you put into it from both the bottom and the top, and you just let the soil organisms mix it all up and break it down and give it to your plants.
Yeah. I mean, you're making a mess, put it back in there, put it in the compost, put it back on. It's just this huge, beautiful cycle.
Yeah.
That is like so interesting I'm sure that raised bed inside mine is just a giant animal fest of love going on down there. What's going on? Just bugs and everything. It's great. And I allude to, we had chickens, so I use what they do. I put that in the compost. Oh, yeah. It's going to be a huge plus for us in a couple of years with that compost. I can't wait to get that stuff into the garden in a couple of years.
Awesome.
Yeah, it's the absolute best. So I got to know, it's like I said, the part of the research is always fun. 11 years ago, where were you when you thought, you know what? I'm getting on YouTube. I'm a gardener. I love it. And I want to put myself in front of a camera. Tell me that story. How did the lover of a garden become a YouTube sensation?
Well, and so, it was almost 20 years ago, I became a master gardener and started teaching classes. And so I taught classes for about 8 years, I guess, at that point, and just kind of discovered YouTube. I watched some videos, and that far back, there really weren't that many gardening channels, and there really weren't that many videos out there. And we had just moved to a new house, and I was just getting the garden started. And so initially, it was really just a way for me to document what I was doing in the garden. And because I'd been teaching classes, it just was natural for me to turn the videos into educational videos. And I really wasn't that serious about YouTube. It was just, I made a couple videos just for my own sake. But one of the videos I made, so I talked about preserving your harvest. After I became a master gardener, I became a master food preserver through Colorado State University as well. And so I started doing the same thing. So I made sauerkraut, and I did a video on how to make sauerkraut. And then we moved from that house, and we were setting up a new house, and I just kind of stopped making videos for a while. I really wasn't anything I was thinking about. And that sauerkraut video just took off. And I think about 2 years after I had made it, and I really wasn't paying any attention, but I went on YouTube one day and it had like 200,000 views.
Wow.
On how to make sauerkraut. And so that's really what got me thinking, oh, wow, I guess there's an audience for these kind of videos. And about that time, this was back in 2014, I was hired to build and create and manage a school garden project. We had a 42-foot greenhouse, over 100 raised beds, 26,000 square feet of growing space, and there was nothing when I stepped foot in the door. And so as part of that, I started making some videos again, just to kind of show what we were doing. But if you've ever taught anything to a child, you know that they're going to ask questions that you are not prepared for.
Yes.
And I'd been teaching classes to adults for over a decade and was well prepared to answer gardening questions from adults. But when the kids started asking, I was not prepared, because they ask things you don't even think about when it comes to the seed or the plant or the beds or anything else. So I, back in about 2014, started going on YouTube just to learn more, in addition to the books and everything else that I have. And I discovered that there's a lot of bad information on YouTube about gardening.
Wow, really?
Just flat out wrong information or misleading information, because there will be a channel from somebody who lives in Florida saying, do it this way. Well, it doesn't work if you have a garden in Colorado. And, it's those kind of things I started recognizing that there needed to be better information, in my opinion, for a beginning gardener that was appropriate for different levels, different abilities, and different locations. And so that's what really got me going. First off, recognizing, wow, by that point, my sauerkraut video had about 300,000 views. And it's like, I should probably devote some time and attention to this. And at the school, I started making videos. So I did a video on how to plant bare root trees and how to do espalier and how to harvest this and how to plant that. And that's what really got me going. And then when I retired from that job about almost 5 years ago, but about 4 years ago, I decided to devote full-time attention to YouTube. And now I have almost 400 videos and over 100 live streams, and it's my full-time job.
Were you pretty comfortable those first couple of, I guess first 50 videos, like setting up the camera, doing the lav? Like, actually, did you storyboard or come up with the concept of like, today I'm going to discuss X, Y, and Z? Was that pretty easy for you?
So easy is a relative term. So,
well, you make it look good.
Thanks. So it was easy because, like we talked about the Air Force, I had taught in much more difficult environments. So putting it together was easy, but there's a big learning curve on YouTube as far as how to shoot, how to edit, how to get the audience, how to grow your channel. And that took about 75 videos, quite honestly. It was about video number 75 when I thought, okay, I've got this now. I know what I'm doing. I've got it figured out. And the information in those older videos is still good, but I look back and think those weren't very good videos.
What was it that snapped that you understood? Like, okay, I got to do this. This is catching people.
Well, and so in the beginning, I didn't fully understand how YouTube works and how to grow on YouTube. And so I was treating a lot of my early videos as basically a lecture.
Okay.
that I'm going to be in front of the camera and I'm just going to give you information. And it's up to you to use that information. And what I've evolved to, and I think you've picked up on this, which is why we're chatting today, is recognizing instead that there's a person on the other end of the laptop or the phone or the TV watching the video. And so I'm now making videos for the individual on the other side. And it's more conversational. It's more what I'm experiencing. It's more, here I am telling you a story about what I've done in my garden, and hopefully you can use it to benefit you in your garden. And that's the big difference, is from the here I am telling you information to now it's I'm sharing information with you so that you can use it and then let me know how it goes and ask me questions about it.
Yeah, I do feel like I need to have a cup of coffee and sit next to you on the garden bed when you're doing the video, because that's what it feels like. Like we're just having a conversation and you're just walking me through the garden on the pluses and minuses and what's easy and what's simple. So that does come across in the videos. That's what I really enjoy.
Well, good. Well, and that's why I say that was about video number 75 that I realized, I don't need to be the professor. I don't need to be, the guy just talking. I can have a conversation and get to know the people in the Gardner Scott community.
Yeah. Have you evolved in the last couple of years technologically? Have you decided like, I'm going to go 4K, or I'm going wireless microphone, or I'm doing this graphic, that graphic? Is that another thing for you to learn?
Oh yeah. So I do have the wireless microphone, and I do upload in HD, and I haven't done 4K because it's not that big of a difference, just regular HD. But, I've got the nice camera. One thing that sets my channel apart a little bit from others, most of the gardening channels are the talking head. It's the camera and the person, and it's one long, steady shot. Mm-hmm. And I try to break it up. If I have 10 things that I'm going to be talking about in a video, then I've got 10 different camera angles in 10 different locations in my garden.
Yeah. I noticed that. That's great. It's like a small movie.
Exactly. And so I try to break it up. I try to keep it, entertaining and moving, with the editing and with the camera angles and the location differences. And of course, as you know, the location matches with whatever I'm talking about. So I don't usually just change location just to change location. There is a reason for it. But in my live streams, my Monday live streams, I have a green screen, and I invite the viewers to send me a picture of their garden. And so every Monday when I do a live stream, somebody's garden is in the background behind me. And then we talk about whatever the topic is of the day. And then at some point during the live stream, I'll point out their garden and what they're doing and what I like and things we can learn from their garden. And so, yeah, I'm definitely using technology. I've got some ideas of some videos. I actually already shot some test footage using some of those kind of masking and green screen outside in the garden. That should be fun when I can get those made.
I love that. I love that you're still pushing, right? You just haven't decided I'm just a gardener, a retired, Air Force guy. I'm going to make this as interesting as possible for the people that come to my channel and view it. And you're pushing that kind of envelope. That's interesting.
Yeah, thanks. I watch a lot of YouTube videos. I don't want to copy anybody. And, I can say that my channel is unique and it is a standalone. And so when I come up with an idea and I start doing any extra research I need to do, I watch what's out there. I don't want to inadvertently put out a video that's exactly like somebody else's video. Mm-hmm. And there's actually been a couple of those times where I came up with an idea. I was going to shoot a video, and then I saw someone else had already done it. And so I didn't do that particular video. And so I watch a lot of videos, and I see, and it's not just gardening. I watch, like most people, lots of other subjects. But, you do it. You watch a video, And after a couple seconds, you just say, this isn't for me, and you switch off. And I think my information, gardening information, is so important that I don't want people switching off. I think it's important for all of us to learn this stuff. So I want to try to keep people watching as much as they can.
Yeah, no, you definitely want to keep your audience. You don't want to lose them because you're not interesting or you've just repeated what 1,600 other people have said on YouTube.
Right.
Yeah. I got to ask you this question because I forgot, and I think it's really important because I know I've got an older woman I help out, Sister Marilyn. I'm helping her with her garden. She lives down the street, and it's about soil and soil testing. Do you have any tips about soil testers and what you should be looking for?
Yeah. So the best thing to do is to get a professional laboratory analysis of your soil.
Okay.
And so I told you the first video I did was just me out in the field observing and starting my planning. The second video I did at this new house was do a soil test. And I have a video that shows how to take the samples and how to send them in. And so I have a laboratory analysis of my soil, and I know exactly what I'm starting from.
Wow.
How bad my soil is. You can buy the home testers on Amazon or at Walmart,
Home Depot,
but
yeah,
they're not that accurate. They'll give you a close pH, and that's about it. The nitrogen levels will vary depending on whether your sample is wet or dry or hot or cold. And so there, you can use it for a general guideline, but if you are really serious and want to develop good soil, you really should do a laboratory analysis. And one of the nice things, that it's not this way here in Colorado, but in many states, the extension office will offer free laboratory soil testing.
Really?
And so you could go to the master gardener desk is usually where they have it, but go to the extension office. They almost definitely have the envelopes and the bags, and they'll give you the address of where you mail it to. And whether you have to pay for it or not will vary from city to city and state to state. And so I did it here in Colorado through Colorado State University. I sent it in my samples, and you can choose how extensive the analysis is going to be. And I think it cost me about $35.
Yeah, that's got to be like worth every penny, right? Because then you can figure out what exactly you need to put in your garden because you're missing something.
Exactly. In fact, I always have it right at my fingertips. So I just pulled it off the shelf. And so I know that my pH is 6.7. And, that's in a nice range for the plants. I know my organic matter, remember we talked about it should be 5% is your target. Mine is 1.7%.
Oh, so you've got to get yours up.
Yeah, so it's very, very low. My nitrogen level is low. My phosphorus level is low. My potassium level is low. My zinc level is low. But my iron and manganese and copper are adequate. And my boron is actually high. And so, these are the kind of things you can look at it in a test, because especially if you are using fertilizers, one of the big problems that gardeners make is they over fertilize.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if you haven't done a soil test, your soil may have adequate amounts of nitrogen and phosphorus and potassium, but you're told to fertilize. So you go out and you put a balanced fertilizer and you don't need it. And now you actually end up over fertilizing because you didn't do a soil test. Well, chances are you're going to spend at least $35 in fertilizers. And if you didn't need any of that, well, you've just paid for the soil test.
Yeah, then you're foolish. When's the best time to do that soil test?
Day one.
Okay.
Like I said, literally, I hadn't even figured out what my plan was. I didn't know where my beds were going to go. I didn't know how many beds I was going to do. I literally just started digging some holes and sent the soil in as I was figuring out what my garden plan was going to look like. And then by the time the test came back, I had a good idea of where my vegetable garden was going to be and where my fruit trees were going to be. And now from that point, then I could figure out what I needed to do for the soil in those various areas of my garden.
Wow. Well, yeah, if people can get that set and get their soil right, everything's going to be so much easier for them, and they're not going to be so frustrated wondering why their cucumbers aren't big or their tomato plant's always limp and it doesn't have enough water or something. If you get your soil straight, it's going to be easier for you and you won't be frustrated and you'll have that longevity to stay with it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's big. So water, right? We mentioned that and I know different regions, altitude, climate. I'm a night water guy. Where do you feel that? Is that just kind of like where you are? Know your soil. Know what the kind of how much water it needs.
Yeah, that's basically it. The water should be to keep the soil moist. Mm-hmm. That should be the goal. So if the soil is already moist, you don't need to water. If the soil is dry, then you should water. If in the morning you recognize that the water or that your soil is dry, then water in the morning. I tend to do most of my watering in the morning, but that's only because I'm out just walking through the garden and seeing what's going on. But in the summer, I do a lot of evening watering because we'll have single-digit humidity here in this part of Colorado.
Right.
And wind and hot days. And so even if I did water in the morning, things are usually pretty dry by the evening. And so I like to water in the evening so that the plants have a nice, moist, cool environment overnight so they can get the day started nice and strong and healthy.
Yeah. Now, this is always something I'm trying to get through my mom's head, and she's always worried, like, oh, the very top of the soil is dry. And I'm like, that's okay. Like your mulch and stuff, it's under that. It's under the inch of soil. If that's moist, you're okay, because the sun is going to just beat on those UV rays on the top bed of your mulch. That's all right. That's what it's there for.
Yes, absolutely.
Right.
You have to think about, the plants are absorbing the moisture through their roots. Uh-huh. And, if the roots are 8 inches deep, then the soil should be moist 8 inches deep. And it's just that simple. A big problem, I think a lot of new gardeners and experienced gardeners as well, you get into a pattern of you water lightly every day, and then you check the soil, and that top inch is moist. Well, you've only added enough moisture or enough water to keep that top inch moist.
Right.
And it ends up drying out 8 inches and 10 inches deep. And you wonder why your plant isn't growing when the soil is moist. Well, no, it's only moist in the top inch or two. You really need to make sure you're watering deep to where the roots are.
See, Mom, Gardner Scott said so. So that's what you got to do. Listen to the expert. Man's got 30 years. Sir, I can't thank you enough for taking the time to do this. This has been an absolute pleasure.
I enjoyed it, Matt. I'm glad that you asked me to participate, and I can talk gardening for hours and hours, day after day. So it's just about my favorite subject to talk about.
Well, my youngest son is attempting to get into the Air Force Academy. So, yes. Nice. So, and he wants to make a trip up to the academy up there. So if I swing by, I'm going to bring you some bananas, because I noticed a couple of times you mentioned you can't have a banana tree. So I think you're a man who enjoys maybe a banana split or a good banana. So if I come out to Colorado,
look me up.
I'm bringing you some bananas, sir.
Okay. Well, I actually was at the Air Force Academy. That's where I retired from. I ran the flight operations at the Air Force Academy. So, feel free to email or call, and if he's got questions, I can help. Now, granted, it's been about 20 years since I retired, but it hasn't changed that much.
No.
It's just up the road, but I can definitely help out.
Well, if you think my energy level's up, we just got done watching Maverick, Top Gun this morning as a family. So everybody around here's on cloud 9. So
nice.
Yeah, so we're ready to fly.
Nice.
thank you so much for your time. I want people to get to your channel. I'm going to link it up, but I think if you're going to start a garden, this is the guy you need to see and watch. He's going to get you going in the right direction.
Thanks, Matt. I appreciate that.
All right. You're the very best, Scott. We'll talk soon. Thank you so much.
Okay. Take
All
care.
right. Bye-bye. Thank you for listening to my conversation with Scott Wilson. I hope you enjoyed the episode. Please click the like button and become a subscriber to the podcast. Remember, you can follow the Just a Good Conversation podcast on Instagram, and you can find all of our past shows on the website at justagoodconversation.com. Thank you for listening.